Right, so let's get started. So if we go onto the Typescript docs, so typescriptlang.org, on the left, you can see the Get Started section in here. We are going to use TypeScript for JS programmers because hopefully all of you are JS programmers. If you're not, we are going to be looking at JavaScript as well. So you will learn something in this video. Essentially, if we read the docs, it says TypeScript stands in an unusual relationship to JavaScript. TypeScript offers all of JavaScript features and an additional layer on top of these, meaning the type system, which is what they describe here. So for example, JavaScript provides language primitives like string and number, but it doesn't check that you've consistently assigned these. TypeScript does. So in JavaScript, we have a few different data types. We have string, number, boolean, null, and undefined, which are your immutable data types. And then we have other data types such as mutable data types. So this is array and objects. So essentially what it does is if we define a shape of a variable or a variable in general, we then need to define the type. So first example, this tutorial provides a brief overview of TypeScript focusing on its type system. So here we go. Types by inference is the first example. So essentially, in creating a variable and assigning it to a particular value, TypeScript will use the value as its type. So in this example, we have a variable set, so let of hello world, which is equal to hello world in a string format. So because we have not defined a type for this, what TypeScript does is it says to JavaScript, right, I'm going to look at this value and it's going to say, right, hello world is a string. So if we hover over it, it says hello world is a string. And this here with the colon and string is how we would define the type. Okay, so let's go into the example. So first example is we're going to go and create a new file. So in this file, I'm just going to call it basics.js first of all. And in here, what I'm going to do is create a variable named animal. So let animal is equal to a dog, first of all. And then what I want to do is reassign the animal. So animal is equal to a value of true this time. Now, as you can see, there are a few areas where we can look at to define where there are issues in our code. First part is here on our left-hand side, we have an orange flag, which means that there's an error in here. The other flag is that when it is red, so we'll look at that in a moment. But for now, I've created this JS file, so what I need to do is, if I hover over animal, TypeScript warns me that it says animal is assigned to value but never used. So we need to use it. So let's go ahead and console log animal, first of all. Now, if we hover over it, it says let animal is a string, which is correct because that is dog. And then when we reassign it and hover over, you can see here, animal again is a string, but we know that this true value is a Boolean type. So that is incorrect. And then when we console log again, you can see that the animal is a string here. So what I want to do is I want to change this from a JS file to a TS file. So if I rename this now to basics.ts, now what happens is I get a couple of errors that are visual to me. So the first port of call is what we looked at before. Here we have the number 1, which suggests that there is an error. Again, at the top of the tab here, we have an error. We have one in our code editor here, and we also have the same error over there. So if I hover over the error, it says here that type boolean is not assignable to type string. This means that TypeScript has inferred the value, what we declared initially, as whatever the value is. So in this case, the animal value is inferred and is equal to a string. As you can see, the dog is a string. So therefore, when we hover over the second reassignment of this value, type boolean is not assignable to type string. So essentially what it's saying is we need to make this a string. So let's go ahead and reassign this to a string called cat. And now, as you can see, the errors have gone on each of the sections that I stated earlier. So what does this do is it essentially tells us that the types are incorrect. So 1, we don't need to keep an eye out for types because TypeScript does that for us. And 2, it tells us exactly where the error is, which is quite handy. So if we go back into the docs and look at what they say, so types by inference is essentially when we declare a variable, what I also want to do is do the same for an object. So let's go ahead and do that and see if the inference happens there as well. So the first object I'm going to create is of a person. Const person is equal to an object, and in here we have a name of John and then the age of 30. Again, the error is showing here saying it's assigned a value but never used, so that's a good indicator that we might have declared a variable somewhere or an object and not used it. So what we can do is we'll just console log person for now, just to get rid of that error. So now when we hover over animal, you can see it's inferred the type as a string. Let's see if it does it for person. So if we hover over person, you can see here that person receives a name, which is a string value, and the age, which is a number. So you can see that TypeScript infers the types for us, so we don't really need to worry about it at a basic level. So that is the inferred type section pretty much complete. So moving on, if we look at defining types, if you look at the definition, it says you can use a wide variety of design patterns in JavaScript. However, some design patterns make it difficult for types to be inferred automatically. So in some cases, what we might need to do is we might need to define the types for them. So let's go ahead and look at the example. So here we have the example of const user, which is a name and an ID. So we've already created our type, which is the person here. And again, it's similar to the TypeScript docs where it infers the type for us. So that is fine. If we scroll down, you can see it says you can explicitly describe this object shape using an interface declaration. So the interface declaration is essentially the same shape as what is over here when we hover over the user. What we are doing is we are assigning the value straight after here, just so it's strictly typed. So let's go ahead and do that. So for our person, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an interface, which essentially is the same as a type, but interfaces are extendable, so you can clone types and extend further, but we'll look at that later on. So the interface for the person is going to be the name as a string and then the age as a number. So that is the interface setup, and person is defined but never used. So we need to use this type or interface in the person object, that the variable that we have created. So when we hover over this now, the outcome should be, instead of this, it should be of type person. So let's define that. So what we do is we do a semicolon and then paste in person. So now if I hover over person, you can see TypeScript is saying that this object is of type person. So now, just to reinforce that this is the correct type, what I'm going to do is give the age of 30 as a string. And now you can see errors have popped up saying that type string is not assignable to type number, meaning that something is wrong in here, which is we've defined a string for age, but really the type of age is a number. And we can go into here and see that interface of person going into the age is of type number. So again, it reinforces that if we make any mistakes, then TypeScript will be there to catch it for us. What we can also do is, instead of the interface, we can also call this a type. So you can use either or. It's completely up to yourself, but I would recommend using a type. So that way you're not confused as a beginner. So type person is equal to the object. And then we're going to do the same for animal this time. So let's declare the type for animal, which is type of animal is essentially equal to a string. And now what we need to do is we need to declare the animal here. So if we pass it in as a type, so after the variable you put semicolons in here and then you declare the type. So that is the type of animal. And as you can see, when we hover over it, the type of animal is showing as well. So what we have covered is the inferred types from TypeScript and also declaring types from TypeScript. What we're going to be looking at next is looking at functions and see how they receive types and how we define types for functions.